Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Washington's National Park Fund's virtual field trip today. Today's topic is controlling invasive reed canary grass at North Cascades National Park. We're so glad you could join us today. My name is Beth Gloston, and I'm a member of Washington's National Park Fund Board of Directors. It's my pleasure to be here, and we at the fund wish you all a happy new year, a healthy new year, and hopefully a 2021 full of great park experiences. Before we get started, I want to say a few words about WNPF. It was formed in 1993 with the purpose of supporting our three amazing parks, national parks in our state, Olympic, Mount Rainier, and North Cascades. The fund is supported by a very capable 7-person staff led by CEO Lori Ward, as well as a 22-member board of directors that's actively involved in the fund's mission. The fund works directly with park superintendents to each year identify priority projects that we then raise money to fund. Our goal is to keep these parks strong, vibrant, youthful, and everlasting so that they are here and beautiful for us now and for generations to come. We started doing these virtual field trips in March of 2020 because, as you all know, some other things were happening at the time. We were concerned with the pandemic that we wouldn't be able to access the park, so I thought, well, let's bring the parks to you. We continue offering these programs through the year to tell you about some of the programs and things that go on behind the scenes at the parks. This program today about controlling invasive reed canary grass will run until about 12:45. It'll be about a 30-minute presentation. There'll be time for questions at the end of the presentation. So if you have them as they arise, as they come up, please enter them in the Q&A box down at the bottom of your screen. So hopefully you have your pack. You have your lunch and plenty of water to join our WNPF Zoom bus for a trip to North Cascades National Park. And today we are so fortunate to have a panel of 3 speakers. We will hear from Miles Berkey, Collin, Mcavinchey, and Sophie Wilhoit, all from North Coast and Cascades Network Invasive Plant Management Team. And while today's presentation will focus on efforts at controlling this invasive species at North Cascades National Park, their work actually takes place at all of our national parks in Washington State. We're grateful for these speakers joining us today. Thank you all for sharing your knowledge, and take it away, Miles.
All right, well, thanks, Beth and Sharon and Casey and everybody at the Washington National Parks Fund and everybody else that's viewing today. It's our pleasure to present our work to you that we're doing up in the Big Beaver Valley, and still waiting. Is that PowerPoint loaded? There we go. Okay, great. And again, thanks. As Beth said, we are the invasive plant management team based out of both Port Angeles and Marble Mount, Washington. And this photo really quick is just Collin, Mcavinchey in a sea of reed canary grass in this big beaver pond, and then way back there is Luna Peak. And I really like this photo. It puts into perspective the beauty that we're trying to save out there and the grass that's we're trying to manage. So a little bit more about who we are, what we do, and where we do it. We are the, as I said, invasive plant management team, and we manage a number of park units in Northern Oregon and Washington State. San Juan National Historic Park on the San Juan Islands, Lewis and Clark, Northwest Oregon, and Mount Rainier National Park. I think if you click through, you should be able to, these should pop up on the screen there. Yeah, there's Lewis and Clark, and then Mount Rainier, and EB's Landing, and Olympic. And today, what we'll be talking about is North Cascades National Park. Over on the right, you can see the a little bit closer in on North Cascades National Park. The 2 pink big blobs are the actual wilderness component of the park. And then the blue and down extreme right are the two national recreation areas that comprise the North Cascades National Park Complex. The star indicates the Big Beaver Valley. And we'll go next. There we go. Here's Ross Lake, and then on the bottom left of the screen encircled is Big Beaver Valley, Big Beaver Creek, and that's primarily where we've been treating reed canary grass in the this whole Ross Lake basin. And the Ross Lake is rather large. It's 23 miles, and both the park and the lake border, and actually the lake ends up, its northern terminus is up in British Columbia. Next shot. And this is just a nice Google Earth topographic shot of kind of the surrounding terrain, kind of the juxtaposition of the like soft gradient wetland complex of the Big Beaver Creek, and then the 8,000 foot peaks with glaciated flanks that feed into the Big Beaver drainage. And just another profile shot of what I was saying earlier. And then the two pins are major treatment sites in the valley. And you can see the Serpentine Creek wind back, way back up into the valley and create this really cool mosaic of wetlands. So I'll talk for a little bit about the natural and cultural history of the valley. As far as we know, earliest human activity in the valley, rather, when I say valley, I'm talking about the greater Upper Skagit Valley. It was hunting ground for Upper Skagit, the Soxhawtla and Lower Thompson tribes. Fast forwarding thousands of years, the first European establishments in the area in the 1880s. There's the Macmillan homestead that we know of on the southeast side of the valley, and really all that remains left is the few plants that he had planted back in the day. There's really no structure, no wagon road or trail or anything left. The Forest Service built the trail that goes through the valley, and when the park inherited the lands, it maintained the trail system through there. And other than that, there's really no major human impact, no structures. The valley was nearly flooded in the early 70s when Seattle City Light wanted to create the High Ross Dam, which would have elevated the Ross Lake Reservoir 100 feet higher, and it would have flooded the entire lower Big Beaver drainage, flooding just old growth and the whole wetland complex. Since that didn't happen, the valley itself hosts so many, just a huge richness of floral diversity. It stands in this orographic transition zone. We call it the Skagit Crest of the park. And it's, while it does feed into the Puget Sound, and it is west of the crest, it has quite a few eastern and interior plants, and western plants too. So it hosts both sides of the Cascade flora. And the bog, or the wetlands itself, has a huge spectrum of everything from nutrient poor bogs to nutrient rich wetlands. Altogether, we have 368 species of vascular plants, 18 invasive species, which is relatively low. We have 3 rare plants, Lycopodium inundatum and Lycopodium nodroideum, and a rare Carex papacola. We have 5 species of fish in the Big Beaver Creek, bull trouts and Endangered Species Act listed fish that we have, and then we have at least 6 species of amphibians. We have the tailed frog, which is state listed, western toad, which is state listed, Canada frog, which is Endangered Species Act petitioned, and the spotted frog, which is, it's likely in the creek. We haven't done enough surveys yet, but we think it's there. And then these photos here on the right, oh, can you go back? Previous slide. I just want to show really quick, Theo holding our western toad. They're everywhere in the valley. really special and really fun to work around. And then on the right here is Harrison, standing next to a native Lactuca species that we really got to see a lot of. And the background and all that kind of shows you the wetlands around there and stuff. So I just wanted to explain this really quick. The Native Plant Society in 1989 did a big floristic inventory of the valley, and here they basically display all the different groups of wetland types in the valley, so you can just see that there's so much going on, different floral groups and vegetative communities, and reed canary grass gets in there. This would all kind of, it would likely just look like one color. So we really want to protect that visual mosaic.
Thanks, Miles. Hi, everyone. I'm Collin Mcavinchey. I'm one of the biological science technicians based out of Olympic National Park. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about what kind of a threat reed canary grass poses to these valuable wetlands up in Big Beaver and areas like that. You've probably all seen this, but for those of you who aren't familiar with the species, it's a native to Eurasia. We're not sure exactly when it was introduced, but it was introduced for livestock forage and to provide stream bank stability. It loves these low, wet areas. This picture over here on the right is a pretty typical stream that's been taken over by reed canary grass. For some perspective, this stuff can easily be 6-7 feet high. We've worked in a lot of areas, a lot of wetlands where you'll be walking through it and you can't see anything in front of you. You're just going through this, crashing through this tall grass. And you can really see how it kind of gets into the water there, and it actually reduces stream complexity, which is not a good thing for our native salmonids. As stream complexity is reduced, you get slower flows of water and rising temperatures, which can harm or even outright kill juvenile salmonids. So it's really important for fish habitat. And if left unchecked, it can just totally take over wetlands like that. For those of us who have the pleasure of working in and around reed canary grass, when it's pollinating, it really causes a lot of allergies and respiratory distress. We spend about a month of the year, even before COVID, wearing masks and sneezing a lot while we're working in this stuff. Next slide. I think this is back to you, Miles.
Right. Thanks, Collin. So as far as we know, reed canary grass showed up in Big Beaver Valley after it became established in Ross Lake in the reservoir. The heavy concentration of it is on the British Columbia side, and otherwise it occupies the high water line of Ross Lake throughout the basin. Since 2004, there's been efforts to control it in along the sides of Ross Lake. Dry Creek, Roland, and Big Beaver all have substantial infestations, and yeah, it is likely moved up into the Big Beaver Valley sometime after it became established in the lake. Yeah, and this is a shot of reed canary grass up at the head of Ross Lake in Canada. In the background, you can see the whole line of cottonwood trees, and this reed canary grass in the foreground extends all the way back up into those cottonwoods and even beyond. Who knows how far? You can go to the next slide. In 2009, there was a survey done to look for reed canary grass up in Big Beaver Valley, and there were several plants collected. However, there wasn't a lot of data, and as far as we know, there really wasn't much reed canary grass. No further surveys were done until 2017. You go to the next slide.
Okay, that's back to me. Thanks again, Miles. So when we're talking about controlling this stuff, we use a sort of a mental tool that's commonly employed called integrated pest management. And you really have four main control options when you're looking at controlling invasive species of any kind. The first would be manual control, which would involve like physically removing the species. So if we're talking about reed canary grass, that could be mowing or physically digging it out. You could have a cultural control method or a fire control method where you'd be, that would include like tarping or like shading out invasive grasses, or of course burning it. You also have then biological controls, which would be releasing an organism into the ecosystem that the invasive species is in that would then predate upon it and hopefully control it. And lastly, you have chemical control, which involves the use of selective herbicides, which in this case, those other methods of control for us, as you'll see when Sophie gets to speaking, really aren't feasible in a backcountry situation like this. Our main tool that we use for controlling reed canary grass is an herbicide called Polaris. Invasive is the name of the main compound. Basically, it functions by interrupting the synthesis of amino acids in the targeted plants. Humans and other mammals don't produce amino acids like this. They're actually essential amino acids that we need to consume that we can't create ourselves. And so it has no effect on us, at least through that pathway. It's kind of the industry standard for restoration for controlling vegetation in and around wetlands. It's very effective at controlling things like reed canary grass and knotweeds. And it's proven to be effective, especially in the Skagit watershed. I've spent a lot of time controlling knotweed as well, which is another common riparian invasive, and Polaris does a great job of doing that. It's approved for in Washington for aquatic use, which is really important. It's been tested to death to be really safe for use around salmonids and macroinvertebrates. And Washington has some of the highest pesticide use controls in the country. We're kind of the standard for that. Next slide. So when we're using these herbicides, we also use compounds called surfactants, which is kind of basically like a dish soap that you add into a mixture of herbicide and water that basically just helps the herbicide stick to the plant and avoids it running off or not being taken up by the plant. But again, this stuff is basically dish soap. We at the National Park Service, in all things that we do, are concerned with both the safety of our applicators and environmental safety. And we've chosen this product, Hasten EA, that's specifically designed to be the least harmful to specifically pollinators. We're really concerned about preserving our native pollinators. I believe that a lot of the testing that's done, you'd have had to physically drown organisms in this substance in order to harm them seriously, which obviously we're not doing. And I think that's on to you, Sophie.
Thanks, Collin. I'm Sophie. I'm the other crew lead at Olympic and also the data manager. So this is a map that came from our 2017 trip out there, and we hiked into 39-mile camp, which is about 5 miles in, and surveyed all these areas. And the green indicates that we didn't find any reed canary grass, and the red indicates we did. But just because it's green doesn't mean that it's not there. It just means we still gotta come back and monitor it. Next slide, please. And this is just a close-up of those areas. And as you can see, that McMillan site on the right in the green is very big. So we definitely, with 6 of us, couldn't get to all those nooks and crannies. So it called for more surveying in the future. Next slide. So in 2019, we were able to go back and do more surveys, and we found more reed canary grass. Next. So this slide shows that there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of planning and coordination is involved, since there's not a lot of close places for a vehicle to get to a boat. So every time we go out here, if anyone is familiar with the Highway 20, we we go to the Diablo boathouse and drop off all of our gear, and usually Miles drives the boat to the Diablo Dam, where he then unloads and then loads onto a truck all of our stuff. Then we all meet him. It's about maybe a half mile to get to the Ross Lake Dam from the other parking lot, and then we load up another boat on Ross Lake, and then we boat all of our stuff and people to Big Beaver, and that usually takes 2 trips at least. Once we're there, we either camp there or we hike in to further up creek. And from there, we're finally able to treat and survey. So as you can see, it's not easy to get to these areas with all of our gear. Next slide. In 2019, we were able to do our first reed canary grass treatments, and as you can see, half the work was just getting there. A lot of places are really inaccessible, and you're kind of bushwhacking through lots of beaver tunnels and spirea and things like that. So yeah, we were able to do what we could. Next slide. This is just a video kind of showing the kind of areas that we found reed canary grass. And oh. Uh-oh. Well, that didn't work. Anyways, so in 2019, this is our map that we came up with. So the bright green shows where we treated, and then on Hodido on the left side. And as you can see, the orange polygon shows where we surveyed. So a lot of that stuff was really hard to get to with just waders. And on the right, the purgatory zone, we named these areas. That's not the official names. The dark green lines show where we bushwhacked through, and then it took about 2 hours to get to that point, and then about an hour to hike back to the trail. So it was it takes a lot of effort to get to these areas. Next slide. And these photos kind of show the diversity of where we find reed canary grass. So in the picture in the middle, you can see Collin is waist deep in lily pads, spraying reed canary grass. And then on the right, we have reed canary grass growing alongside Canada thistle, which is really convenient for us when we can kind of spray 2 weeds at once. And that's on the shore of somewhere on the creek. Next slide. So our extra obstacle of 2020, as you all know, was COVID-19, and we had to be socially distanced when mixing, 6 feet apart, and when we were in close vicinity of each other, wearing masks. And we all made it work. Next slide. So this slide shows all the different types of environment. Oh, can you go back? Of where we're treating, just in this one valley. So imagine it's 80 or 90 degrees Fahrenheit out. It's hot, it's humid. We're wearing long sleeves, long pants, gloves, eye pro. That's kind of standard procedure for spraying herbicide. And the picture up on the almost right corner, you see Collin. He's wearing waders, and he's wearing a backpack sprayer. He's climbing over a log jam. Sometimes you're putting your waders on top of your backpack sprayer because it's so hot out. Sometimes the mosquitoes are so bad. You can see in that middle photo, I'm wearing a mosquito net on my face. And sometimes you're just in waist deep water with a backpack sprayer. So we're always aware of our microclimate, our microenvironment, adapting to the situation. Sometimes we had a day where it was too hot to spray. If it gets too hot, the herbicide can volatilize, so you just want to be aware and not be spraying when it won't work. So we're always kind of flexible. In 2020, we started to get a system down. We added pack rafts to our repertoire, which in addition to the waders really helped us get to some areas we weren't able to before. And the weather cooperated for the most part. Since we can't spray when it's raining, we made ourselves useful and surveyed on those days. And we're always trying to find more places to survey. And our techniques are always evolving. So this was the really fun new part of this year. Floating down the creek, it was very challenging, but definitely worth it. There's a lot of log jams, like you can see on the right side, and those took a lot of coordination and effort to get over those. And you can see Collin on the left, he's mixing on shore. Next slide. This shows just a map that we looked at the imagery and kind of figured out maybe it might be worth looking at these areas to survey because there might be reed canary grass. So on those rainy days, that's kind of what we did. And then you can see that the left, or the top box is the Luna area, and that, I don't know if you can see on the locator map, is outside of the North Cascades recreational area, and it's actually in the wilderness of the park proper. And so that's about 10 miles into the Luna camp, and we hiked about 4 miles from there into the wetland, and it's really important that there's not reed canary grass up there because it can really really disrupt the habitat up there. So it looked pretty good up there, but definitely warrants future monitoring. Next slide. And this is the survey we came up with this year. The red indicates the reed canary grass, and we found just some small populations of other plants. And next slide. And then these are the areas that we sprayed, the blue areas. And you can kind of see a little, yeah, next slide.
So yeah, this past season was probably our most successful up there. We treated almost 4 acres of reed canary grass and Canada thistle. All told, it took 660 person hours to do this, which is very expensive. Next slide. So the future of reed canary grass at Big Beaver. We still have some areas to survey. That's going to be ongoing each season. Now that we've started treatment, we're also going to begin treatment monitoring, find out how effective our work has been. We've established photo points, so we'll be able to go back and take exactly the same picture in the exact same place again and see how the landscape is changing. We'll definitely be performing additional treatments on new areas that we find. As a question mark, we may someday be expanding our treatment areas to other watersheds flowing into Ross Lake or the shore of Ross Lake. Again, the lake is almost entirely ringed by reed canary grass. So we're beginning to think about that. And this Big Beaver Creek is only one creek flowing into this lake, as special as it is. We also are hoping to begin partnering with British Columbia Parks. We're speaking with some folks about that to begin control of reed canary grass up at the head of the lake. And these are just a couple of websites for more information. You can visit our home page, I guess it's called, the Invasive Plant Management Teams through the National Park Service. There's a link there. And then for specific questions about pesticides, the National Pesticide Information Center has a great resource that you're welcome to check out as well. And thank you.
Thank you to Collin and Miles and Sophie for that presentation on controlling reed canary grass. I am amazed at the vastness of this project that you're taking on. And I just wonder if maybe one of you can comment on what Collin, maybe you began to speak a little bit about following up and seeing the effects of your treatments. But I wonder if you have any kind of sense of how successful any treatments have been. And related to that, what do you hope will grow back in place of this grass, of this invasive grass?
Yeah, let's see. We had in 2019 we treated like basically in this beaver pond, and the water level was so high we were only able to treat like the very tops of the grass itself. I myself stood in, the water came almost above my waders treating this stuff, and that didn't appear to be super successful because most of the plant was underwater. So that's not a great example. But this year, we are hoping to have better success on the ones that we were able to treat the whole plant. As far as what's going to come in after these guys are gone, we're hoping that just the native vegetation just moves in on its own. Miles spoke to about those, you know, some of the rare and special plants that already are growing up in these wetlands. So if we could just keep these invasives down, we'll just let nature take its course, hopefully.
Okay, thank you. Let me see, we've got questions coming in. Please put your questions in the Q&A box. Let's see, James asks, is it possible to fund a helicopter to spray overhead for large or difficult areas to reach?
That would be kind of difficult just because a helicopter would involve just kind of dumping in a large area, whereas the reason we're there is we can really be selective about where we're spraying because there's native vegetation really kind of mixed in with everything, and so we're trying to be as careful as possible and not hit the natives. We're trying to help the native plants, so it wouldn't work out as well.
Okay, thank you. And then the Cahills ask, are there lists of invasives for the various parks on their websites? Can somebody find out more about what species are a problem in all of our national parks?
Yeah, the invasive plant management team's homepage should have some information about that. I know our leadership was trying to compile lists of all the species. I don't know if they're done at the moment, but that was definitely in the works this past year. So keep an eye on that website.
So that's through the organization that you are working through. Okay.
Yeah, the National Park Service puts that on.
Okay, let's see. And Julia asks, I was under the impression that herbicides were not permitted in wilderness areas. How long has that treatment been used? And is there some special process to go through to be able to use the herbicide?
Let's see. Sophie, you might be able to, I don't personally go through the regulation processes that have to happen for this to be done. I know we do the NPDES, what is it, National Pesticide Discharge something system. We have to fill out permits to use herbicides in national parks. That definitely happens. Herbicides are used in the backcountry very sparingly. Obviously, we're not, it's just a tool in our arsenal. But yeah, it does happen in national parks.
Okay.
Well said, Collin.
Good. And do we know where the reed canary grass, is it reed canary reed? How it got there in the first place? Reed canary grass. How did it arrive and how has it been so successful? What has it replaced?
Well, it we're not sure where it started, but people hike in all the time, and if you're not checking the seeds on your boots, you know, that's a vector to get into those pristine areas. So why brushing your boots are important.
Okay, good. And Julia asks, and I think you mentioned some other strategies to try to control this invasive species, but Julia asks, do you do micro burns? Has that been anything that's possible for control of this species?
We have not done any of that on reed canary grass. Just as you can see, the amount of infrastructure that it takes just for us to get up and do these small treatments. I can't even imagine what it would take to use fire. But I mean, fire is used to control lots of invasive species. We don't use any of that though.
Okay. Let's see. What do you recommend we do if we want to minimize bringing invasive species into the parks? Bleach? How do we treat our shoes so we don't make this problem worse?
We do use bleach. We also use these boot brushes, and it's just really helpful to scour out seeds, vegetation fragments. That's really important, and that's a procedure that a lot of people are doing these days. And I know here at the park we have a boot brush right at the Wilderness Information Center for folks to brush off their boots before they enter the park.
Okay, I'm sure all of us now will be much more vigilant about
It'll save us a lot of work.
Tools. Yeah, it really is the challenge to this program is really clear from your presentation. Sarah, here's another question. Sarah asks, where do you see the future of general invasive weed control going? Any up and coming research or techniques?
Boy. I don't know. That's a very broad question. I don't know. Go ahead.
Well, there is talk of using drones.
Oh, that's true.
But,
yeah.
Drones with herbicide on.
Yeah, New Zealand or Australia.
It would need to be really perfected because it's hard to do. Like, it's hard to see what's there, you know, and be precise, I guess.
Yeah,
Okay.
I could think of some cool science fiction ways that this could be improved, but I think right now this is the cutting edge, what we're doing.
Okay. Okay. Actually, it's interesting that one of you mentioned drones, because that was a question. That was a question from another person. If there can be helpful yet, but again, it still sounds like you really need to be there, looking at what you're applying the herbicide to be sure that, because it's not obviously not specific to the one plant. Let's see. I have a question. I used to have horse property in Redmond, and I remember being told that a good deal of the grass in my pastures was this reed canary grass. And again, I was just overwhelmed, but my goodness, it would mean, you know, killing off and replanting nearly the whole pasture. But what are there things that homeowners can do if you know you have this species on your property? What do you recommend?
Well, a really effective way to treat it, if you can, is to mow it. Repeated mowing. You can mow it, tarp it off, do repeated treatments in that way, kind of mechanically. Again, like we reviewed, like Polaris, the herbicide we use, is very effective. Animals can graze on it, but yeah, I don't know. That's I'd say.
If you're comfortable using herbicide, you know, Home Depot sells pre-mixed glyphosate and other, you know, pretty commonly used herbicides that are very effective. But also, we've had great success with tarping. That works really well for small patches.
Okay, okay. And then reseeding or whatever to enhance what you want to grow to be there. Yeah. Okay. I think that.
I guess
Yeah.
Oh, Beth, I just wanted to just revisit the question about people not knowing that herbicides are used in the park.
Okay.
In 2011, the North Cascades went through a pretty rigorous licensing of herbicide use in the park, and each park has to have that done, and it's like a document like this big for us. So there's a lot of review that goes into it, just to clarify things.
Okay, no, I appreciate it. I think all of us are those interested in our parks want to be. It's interesting to hear the rigor with which under the process that you go through to use chemicals in the park, and that that they undergo scrutiny. I think that's reassuring to us all. Thank you, thank you. Well, I think that brings our program pretty much to a close. Thank you, Miles and Sophie and Collin, for sharing your information and experiences with us about this invasive species. And thank you all for joining us today. I want to let you know that we have an upcoming virtual field trip in 2 weeks on January 20th. And on that day, we'll be meeting with Olympic National Park engineer Carrie Cook to talk about wastewater management, a very practical issue for the parks. And it's called Following the Flush. So tune in to learn about this practical issue and how it's managed at Olympic National Park. And in February, we'll be transitioning to holding these virtual field trips once a month. And you can sign up on our website for our future field trips. And of course, you can go to our website and view videos or recordings of our past field trips. Finally, again, Washington National Park Fund is here to support these amazing parks, and we do so with your financial donations. We're pleased to report that in 2020, WNPF gave over $650,000 to support Mount Rainier, Olympic, and North Cascades National Parks in these 4 areas: advancing science and research, improving visitors' experiences, expanding volunteerism and stewardship, and providing for youth and family programs. We're very grateful for those of you who've contributed to the fund and helped contributed to the health of our national parks in Washington State. And if you are interested in contributing, please visit our website, www.wnpf.org. And again, thank you so much for attending our virtual field trip today. Take care.